Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome to our review of the new Melissa Barrera film, Scream 7. I'm kidding. It's Your Monster. Yeah. Now I know you're all still holding out for Scream 7. I don't know, guys. I don't think that's going to happen. But this movie did. And yeah, this was one that I remember hearing about, I think, way back when all that drama was happening. They were talking about this kind of being one of her upcoming films along with Abigail. So people were kind of using this saying, hey, she's still got some prospects to kind of get away from the Scream franchise a little bit and come out a little bit unscathed, even though, I don't think any of that necessarily is on her. There's a lot of politics involved in those decisions. So this, though, I got a little concerned about, I'm not going to lie, because I heard about it and then it completely fell under the radar. And I didn't know jack about it until it was announced, oh, it's coming out in October, which was only a couple of weeks ago. So I was like, oof, is this a good sign? I don't know what to do. I don't know, man. Luke, what did you think of Your Monster as we were kind of gearing up for it?
I'm right there with you. I remember this being in the conversation when the whole Scream drama was happening, and I know we leaned a little more negative on the last few Scream installments. So I was excited, Abigail, this coming out to see what Melissa Barrera was going to do, kind of give me a chance to enjoy some performances and not be so bogged down by, what I remember from Scream and where it has gone. So I honestly forgot about this as well. And when we were gearing up for that October releases, this one obviously jumped on the radar and it looked a little comical to me. I thought it was a little fun. Wasn't taking this one too seriously. So, going into it, I didn't have a dog in this fight. It was just kind of it could be good, could be negative. I'm not going to be hurt one way or another. So going into it, I was open-minded. I think from the trailer it looked fun. I gotta say, I was pretty neutral going into this one.
Yeah, no, I mean, all in all, definitely didn't really have a dog in the fight. It's the best way to say it. So after sitting down and watching the film, I can say a lot of surprises in here. I really found myself kind of falling for this movie in a little bit. I thought that not only does the comedy work for me, the minor horror elements that they add into this, and I will say minor, this is very much a romantic comedy at its core. I thought were also very fun. And this just feels like another movie. We were talking about it yesterday, that is very much on the same wavelength as like a Lisa Frankenstein. I could really see an audience that liked that film fawning for this. And I think deservedly so, because it's a very well done, not too overly dramatic, not too overly cheesy, kind of romantic comedy. It's something we don't see very often anymore.
And I think as a horror fan, you really have to go into this one looking at it through the lens of the versatility of the horror space. As you just mentioned Lisa Frankenstein, that came out earlier in the year. For us, flew under the radar for a bit. We didn't get a chance to go out to the theater to see it. I know it already has a cult following and, has those comedy bits. There's a unique story in general. I think, you look at Your Monster, you can certainly draw parallels there with the versatility of the horror space. Like you said, light horror elements in this thing. So don't really go in expecting any sort of graphic horror. But as you look at 2024 as a whole, you have Lisa Frankenstein, you have Your Monster, Terrifier 3 was just at the box office. So it's kind of like looking at how wide the horror space can be and really what you can bring to it. I think going in with that type of lens here really accentuated a positive experience, I guess you would say, just because this is a lot of fun. It's not deep rooted in horror. There's just those light elements that, you can really just look at and say, this is just a lot of fun. We wanted to add in just a sprinkle of horror for the fans and really just tell a romance, a love story. So I think they really handle those elements rather well. And I'll be honest, growing up with my mom, my sister, I watched a lot of those romantic comedies like 50 First Dates or Failure to Launch. And as I was watching this, I was like, I haven't seen those films in the better part of a decade. And it was just tugged at my heartstrings to be able to sit down and say, this is kind of a horror movie, but not really. And I'm getting to enjoy some sort of romantic comedy.
Yeah, and you know what surprised the hell out of me was that this was R-rated. When I sat down to watch it, I didn't know that. So, with the kind of edge to the comedy that this brings, again, that's something we don't see a lot of anymore. Like, comedies are basically non-existent at the box office. You get a little bit more of that with TV nowadays. But like you don't see stuff like that. And I'm not saying this is like crass or vulgar or raunchy in anything, but I did appreciate just kind of the harder edge that our characters had with each other, especially in that early half of the film, because like they were just like, risen each other and stuff back and forth. And just, I loved the dynamic. I thought that that was really the big selling point, and honestly the biggest part of the movie that I could say that I adored the most was just the relationship, and kind of not just the romantic angle, but the relationship, the friendship between the monster and Melissa Barrera's character here. So yeah, Melissa Barrera and Tommy Dewey, absolutely, they stole the show. They are the leads, so they need to, and they killed it. They crushed it. I thought they were the best part of this film for me.
They really do carry this. I mean, it's an interesting concept, but you really need those actors to really breathe life into these characters, and they absolutely do that. Tommy Dewey was not familiar with him going into this. I had to look him up as we were watching the film itself, and he captivated me. I think he's got perfect comedic timing for the character that he's playing in this. He really does sell it. Melissa Barrera, she is all over the place in a good way in this emotionally.
Hmm.
She's dealing with a traumatic event, and going into this, there's those comedy bits, those emotional bits, there's anger bits in this thing. So she really does have this range that I was so excited to see her show off here, because at times she's funny, at times you're really empathizing with her, and you're really just along for the ride here. They really do take you on that emotional ride, and these two just have profound chemistry on screen.
Oh yeah, and that's the big piece of this that I think works for me the most. And it's not a shock that Melissa Barrera is excellent in this. I mean, she's definitely one of the strongest bits of the Scream films, even though we weren't the biggest on just how they really told their story. I think Melissa Barrera and the cast were never an issue for us in those. And I think that she's excellent in this as well. I think that you're right. She is a very dynamic performance. She's got a lot of different spots and emotions that she has to be in. And it never comes off as insincere or annoying. It always is very believable. And I think that you're right. Tommy Dewey was just the surprise for me here, because he's an actor I didn't know very well, who I had actually just seen in Saturday Night, that I went and saw with my father, and he was also really good in that. So, I didn't make that connection till just before recording, but it is one of those things where it's like I definitely could see a future for this guy, especially if he plays more roles like this, where it's like he's not afraid to kind of get dressed up. And the monster itself, it's again, it's only in name and in design. It's very much like I compared it to the original Teen Wolf in a sense, or it's just like, yep, it's just a dude dressing up like a wolf beast kind of thing, and it's has nothing else to do with it really. Like, he's got some good gags, he's got some good one-liners. I gotta say, we were talking about it the other day, I really liked the angle they took with just how this monster comes to be. What is the relationship here? Where does he come from? It's so brief, but it works so well, especially with a couple of little flashbacks they do. One of my favorite bits in the movie, I thought it was just hilarious. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. I love how you kind of brought that into, a modern day setting. It worked so well for me.
And we have a review up for Carved, and I'd explained in that one where everyone knows my relationship with comedy and horror and how sometimes it just doesn't hit. Carved dives really deep into the comedic routes and really owns what it is. Your monster dives into some of those comedic routes. It doesn't go as hard as Carved, but it does absolutely own what it is. The introduction to the monster, when he pops up on screen, is just phenomenal. From that point on, you know that this film knows what it is. It's in on the joke. It is just there to show again the versatility of the horror space and what it can do, because you have a monster in your closet, you have a monster under your bed, and we're kind of just taking that little tidbit of a story and we're applying it to those romantic comedies that we've seen, 15 years ago, and how well those worked. And it really does take you on those familiar beats, but it's so reminiscent. It's so heartwarming. I think, especially not seeing films like that, where this isn't anything overly unique from a storytelling perspective, but just being able to add in that idea of a monster under your bed, and we're going to take you on that ride, and we're going to, have these interesting comedic bits, but also these slight elements of horror in here. I think that was just such an interesting melting pot to really say this is such a fun October release where you can just turn this on and have a lot of fun. This is 100% a couples movie. Go to the theater, check this one out like that because you're going to have a lot of fun. And just the performances are there. And there's some catchy. I'm not really a musical person at all, but I'll say from the musical numbers that are in this thing, I found myself now stuck in my head for a few minutes after the scenes. So I think there's a lot of fun in this film. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing that I think you're going to be talking about at the end of the year, but it is so versatile in the horror space. It's so unique. It's something so different that I think a lot of people will have fun with this one.
I agree, and I'm coming at it from that angle too, because for me, at the end of the day, I all the points that I pointed out so far that I enjoyed, I did enjoy. I thought they were wonderful. I just found the film around the rest of it to be a bit unremarkable for the most part. And again, I know they're not trying to do anything too crazy. It just felt a little safe, a little bit more like, we kind of have this cynical edge to our characters and, just everything going on. I just thought maybe, in the kind of motivations of the characters, what we were doing, we could have found a little bit more of a fun route to go. I kind of felt the same way with like Beetlejuice too, where it's just like, that movie has so many positives that when you get down to the brass tacks and we actually get those characters interacting with the inciting story, it does feel a bit like, okay, why are we going so safe when we have all these elements that you're primed to do something so, catchy and so interesting and so dangerous. And again, I'm not a big musical person. So it was one of those things where that is a tough sell for me. Even though I enjoyed the film, it is something where it's like, do I see myself really sitting down to rewatch this one? I don't know, maybe not. I think like if my wife or, I wanted to show this to some friends or something, if they were interested in it, I wouldn't mind it. But I don't know if I'm going to necessarily be a person to seek this one out again.
And looking at it, me personally, I don't think I would just sit down and watch this one. My wife is a huge fan of it, so I know I'll be revisiting this one. This one would be a fun one to show my daughter when she's a little bit older. I think she'd
Hmm.
have a great time for this one. So this one isn't unlimited rewatchability at all. There's a place and a time for it. But looking at this film, we're always going to want that. Us being a horror podcast, we're always going to want that harder horror edge. And there's a decision in here our one of our characters makes. I'm not going to go into it, that I thought was going to change the whole dynamic of the film. And I thought maybe we were going to dive deeper into some horror elements because we were changing that dynamic. Now, they teased it a little bit, but never really went there. And I can't really
Hmm.
judge this film on what I wanted it to be there. But I will say, I think that idea could have been rather interesting because of the way they presented it and really what they could have done. Unfortunately, they didn't go that route. But what we did get, like you said, was safe. But I think it was one of those things where it's a comfort meal where, yes, it's safe, but they put it in front of you and you didn't hate it. You really did actually enjoy that meal. It just wasn't something unique, wasn't something different. So I think there was a palette for this. It just wasn't it just isn't for the hardcore horror fan. If you're going into this for some hardcore horror elements, you're not going to get those here. It's not going to satisfy your appetite in that aspect. But just going in and having fun, I can say Your Monster is an easy recommend for me.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, I'm gonna give it worth a watch. And again, that's not a bad rating. It's just a little bit under recommend. And I only say that because I want to save my recommends for films that I could catch myself really revisiting. And this is just something where again, the musical aspect takes away from me personally. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was kind of excited when that started to happen, and then they kind of pull away from it really quickly. So it did leave me a little bit like, okay, yeah, it's not a bad movie though. It's not something that I'm trying to be uber harsh on. It's just that I thought personally in my heart of hearts, I think that this is a one-time watch that I was really happy I saw. And again, the performances are excellent. And it's something that I think that this director and this team should be very proud of because it's not often that we see projects like this, and it's not often that they work, as well as they did. I just wish they would have pushed that envelope a little bit more for me. So that's really where I sit with it. I definitely think that if you're excited for this, you're going to love it. And I think if you're looking for, again, like Luke said, a good date movie this weekend as we're coming into the October season, this one has a little bit of that horror edge to it, and it has a little bit of that romance and a little bit of that comedy. It's a well-rounded meal. So definitely go ahead and check this one out for you. But yeah, I guess that's going to wrap us up here for Your Monster. So definitely let us know down below if you're looking forward to this, if you're a Melissa Barrera fan, if you are interested in what this concept has and what we could see spawn from it. Again, we would compare this to something like a Lisa Frankenstein. So it's something where it's like we could see more of these movies kind of popping up. Yeah, I'm very curious to see where it goes. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, smash your ass. Splattercast, smash your ass. Splattercast, smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass. Splattercast, smash your ass. Splattercast, smash your ass. Splattercast, gonna smash your ass.